The summer of 1849 in Willow Creek, Alabama, was unlike any other. The air hung heavy, thick with moisture that clung to your skin like a desperate lover. The townsfolk called it the devil's breath, when the heat rose from the ground in visible waves, shimmering like spirits dancing above the dirt roads. It was during this peculiar summer that I first heard about Eliza Montgomery. My name is Dr. James Barrett. I've been documenting curious medical cases for nearly 3 decades now, and what happened in Willow Creek still haunts my thoughts when darkness falls. I was 36 then, full of ambition and the arrogance that comes with youth. I believed science could explain everything, that there was no ailment beyond the reach of modern medicine. How terribly mistaken I was. I had been summoned to Willow Creek by an old colleague, Dr. William Thatcher, who sent a letter so urgent that the edges of the paper were frayed from the messenger's journey. The letter was brief, the handwriting uncharacteristically hurried for a man known for his meticulousness. "James," it read, "I have encountered something beyond my comprehension. A girl, 17 years of age, with a condition I dare not describe in writing. 2 physicians have already abandoned the case. I fear I may be the 3rd. Come quickly. The Montgomery Plantation, Willow Creek. I arrived on a Tuesday, the sun high and unforgiving. The Montgomery Plantation stood like a sentinel at the edge of town, its white columns rising proudly against the azure sky. It was one of the largest estates in the county, owned by Judge Hiram Montgomery, a man whose reputation for stern justice was exceeded only by his wealth. The house was oddly quiet as I approached. No slaves working the grounds, no sounds of life emanating from the usual hustle of a plantation this size. Only the cicadas sang their relentless summer chorus. A house servant, an elderly man with eyes that had witnessed too much, met me at the entrance. "You the doctor from Mobile?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, and he led me inside without another word. The interior was cool compared to the punishing heat outside, but there was a peculiar odor in the air, something sickly sweet yet tinged with decay. It reminded me of the back rooms of apothecaries where certain herbs had been left too long. Dr. Thatcher was waiting in the study, a glass of amber liquid clutched in his trembling hand. I had never seen my friend in such a state. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, as if he hadn't slept in days. "James," he said, rising to greet me. "Thank Providence you've come. William, what has happened here? Your letter was most concerning." He drained his glass before speaking again. "Have you ever questioned our understanding of the human body, James? Ever wondered if there are ailments that defy all medical knowledge?" I smiled, attempting to ease the tension. "Every physician faces mysteries, William. That's why we continue our studies. This is different," he said, his voice breaking. "The girl, Eliza Montgomery, the judge's daughter. I've never seen anything like it. Neither had Dr. Collins or Dr. Foster before they fled." "Fled? Surely you exaggerate. Dr. Collins left town entirely. Foster refuses to speak of what he witnessed. He's taken to drink, abandoned his practice." My curiosity was piqued. 2 respected physicians abandoning their duty was unprecedented. "Tell me about the patient." Thatcher poured himself another drink, his hand shaking so badly that liquor spilled onto the polished desk. "It began 3 weeks ago. Eliza complained of an unusual warmth in her abdomen. Not pain, mind you, warmth. By evening, she was feverish. Judge Montgomery summoned Dr. Collins, who diagnosed a common inflammation and prescribed the usual remedies: bloodletting, mustard plasters." Thatcher paused, staring into his glass. "The next morning, Eliza's chambermaid found her sheets soaked through. Not with sweat, James, but with something else. Something viscous, as if parts of her were liquefying." I frowned. Perhaps an unusual form of suppuration? That's what Collins thought. But when he examined her again, he discovered— Thatcher's voice dropped to a whisper. Her flesh had begun to soften. Not like decomposition, she was very much alive, but as if her body was losing its structural integrity from within. By the 3rd day, Collins refused to return. That's when Foster was called, and he observed the same symptoms. Worse, the condition had progressed. Foster tried every treatment in our medical arsenal: mercury compounds, quinine, even experimental electrical stimulation. Nothing helped. By the time I was summoned a week ago, Eliza's condition was— He shook his head, unable to continue. "William, I must see her. The family has moved her to the East Wing. The judge insisted on isolation. Only her mother and 1 servant are permitted entry now." Thatcher finished his drink. "I'll take you to her, but I warn you, James, prepare yourself. We walked through the silent house, our footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The sweet putrid smell grew stronger as we approached the east wing. At the end of a long corridor stood a slave woman, perhaps 50 years of age, her posture rigid with vigilance. "Martha," Thatcher said, "this is Dr. Barrett from Mobile. He's come to consult on Miss Eliza's case." Martha's eyes found mine, filled with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Another doctor?" The others couldn't help her. "I understand," I said gently, but perhaps with fresh eyes. She studied me for a moment longer, before nodding. "Miss Caroline is with her now. I'll announce you." Martha disappeared into the room, returning moments later. "You may enter, doctors, but Miss Caroline says you mustn't touch her daughter, not for any reason." The room beyond was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the sunlight. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, lavender and something bitter I couldn't identify. A woman knelt beside a four-poster bed, her head bowed in prayer. Caroline Montgomery, the judge's wife, was once renowned for her beauty, but grief had etched deep lines into her face. "Mrs. Montgomery," I said softly, "I'm Dr. Barrett." She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry, as if she had exhausted her capacity for tears. "Have you come to help my Eliza, doctor? Or merely to observe her suffering like the others?" "I've come to help if I can." "Can you? 3 learned men before you have failed. Dr. Collins fled like a coward. Dr. Foster stands in our church and proclaims my daughter's affliction is divine punishment. And Dr. Thatcher," she glanced at my colleague, "he at least had the decency to admit his limitations." "I make no promises, madam," I said honestly, "but I cannot help without examining the patient." She rose slowly, moving aside to reveal the figure on the bed. I steeled myself, expecting the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of Eliza Montgomery. She lay atop the sheets, covered only by a thin cotton shift that did little to conceal her condition. Her once beautiful face remained relatively unchanged, skin pale but intact, eyes closed as if in peaceful slumber. But below her neck, her body had undergone a transformation that defied explanation. Her limbs had lost all definition, appearing to melt into the mattress like wax beneath a flame. The cotton shift sank into depressions where solid flesh should have been. Through the thin fabric, I could see that portions of her torso had become translucent, revealing shadowy suggestions of organs beneath, organs that seemed to be slowly losing their boundaries. "May I?" I gestured toward the bed. Mrs. Montgomery nodded but whispered, "Do not touch her. The pain when she is touched. I cannot bear to hear her screams again." I approached cautiously, my physician's mind racing to categorize what I was seeing within the framework of known medical science. Cachexia? Impossible. The deterioration was too rapid, too strange. Some form of consumption? No, the lungs appeared uninvolved. A parasitic infection, perhaps? Eliza's eyes fluttered open as I leaned closer. They were startlingly blue, clear and cogent despite her condition. "Another doctor," she whispered, her voice surprisingly strong. "Have you come to save me, sir, or to study me?" "Both, if possible," I answered truthfully. A sad smile touched her lips. The others said the same, before they ran away. I pulled a chair beside her bed, careful not to disturb the mattress. "Can you tell me when you first noticed something was wrong?" She considered this. 3 weeks ago, Tuesday. I was helping Mother arrange flowers from the garden when I felt a strange warmth inside me, as if I'd swallowed something hot. By evening, I could feel it spreading through my belly, into my chest. Pain? Not at first. It was almost pleasant, like sitting too close to a fire on a winter's night. The pain came later, when things began to shift. "Shift?" She turned her head slightly, those lucid eyes finding mine. "I could feel parts of me moving that shouldn't move, doctor. Organs sliding against each other, bones softening. By the 3rd day, I knew something was terribly wrong when I tried to rise from bed and my legs wouldn't support me. They just gave way, like they weren't solid anymore. I found myself both horrified and fascinated. And the progression? Has it been constant? It comes in waves. Hours of burning, melting sensation followed by brief periods of relief. Each wave leaves me more." She glanced down at her body. "Like this." I had 1,000 questions, but her eyelids were growing heavy. "Rest now," I said. "I'll speak with your mother and Dr. Thatcher." Her hand, still partially formed, though the fingers had begun to fuse, reached toward me. "Don't leave yet. Everyone leaves." The naked fear in her voice stirred something in me. I had seen many patients face death, but none with such awful clarity about their fate. I'm not leaving Willow Creek until we understand what's happening to you, Eliza. You have my word. She seemed satisfied with this and closed her eyes. Within moments, her breathing had slowed into the rhythm of sleep. I followed Mrs. Montgomery and Thatcher back into the corridor. Has she been examined for parasites? Tropical diseases? I asked once we were out of earshot. Everything, Thatcher replied. Blood samples showed nothing unusual, though. He hesitated. What? It's strange. Her blood seems thinner than normal, with an unusual viscosity. Under the microscope, some cells appear to be dissolving, for lack of a better term. That's impossible, I said automatically. So is what you just witnessed. Mrs. Montgomery interjected sharply. My daughter is melting, doctor. Melting from within. If you cannot accept the evidence before your eyes, you will be no more help than the others. I bowed my head, chastened. You're right, of course. Forgive me. In our profession, we sometimes hide behind scientific certainty when faced with the truly inexplicable. I looked to Thatcher. The treatments attempted thus far, as I mentioned, bloodletting, mercury, quinine, electrical stimulation, also poultices, herbal remedies from the local folk healers, even experimental compounds I obtained from New Orleans. Nothing slows the progression. And no other cases like this? No one else in the household or town showing similar symptoms? Mrs. Montgomery shook her head. Only Eliza. What about her activities before onset? Any unusual exposures, travels, visitors to the plantation? None, Mrs. Montgomery said firmly. Eliza rarely leaves the plantation. She's a gentle soul who prefers books and music to social engagements. Something in her tone caught my attention. Rarely leaves. But she has left recently. A flash of something, fear, guilt, crossed Mrs. Montgomery's face. There was an excursion, a month ago. A picnic by Weeping Creek with some other young ladies from town. Properly chaperoned, of course. Weeping Creek? The name was unfamiliar to me. A small tributary that runs through Montgomery land, Thatcher explained. About 2 miles from the main house. Did anything unusual happen during this picnic? Mrs. Montgomery hesitated. Eliza mentioned, no, it's foolishness. Please, Mrs. Montgomery. Even details that seem insignificant might help us understand your daughter's condition. She twisted her handkerchief between her fingers. Eliza said she saw something in the water, a light beneath the surface. She reached in to touch it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said it felt like touching lightning. I exchanged glances with Thatcher. And how soon after this did her symptoms begin? 2 weeks later. But surely you don't think... She trailed off, her rationality warring with a mother's desperation for answers. I don't know what to think yet, I admitted. But I would like to see this creek. My husband will never allow it, Mrs. Montgomery said. He forbids any discussion of Eliza's condition outside this house. He believes it would damage our family's reputation. With all due respect, madam, your daughter's life may depend on understanding all possible causes of her affliction. She studied me for a long moment before nodding. Martha knows the way. She can take you tomorrow at first light before the judge begins his day. That night I stayed in a guest room at the plantation, reviewing my medical texts by lamplight, searching for any documented case that might resemble Eliza's condition. I found nothing. Sometime past midnight, I heard a commotion from the east wing. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. I rushed to Eliza's room to find Thatcher already there, along with Mrs. Montgomery and Martha. Eliza was awake, her face contorted in agony, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's happening again, she gasped. The burning. Make it stop. Please make it stop. Thatcher looked helpless. I've administered the maximum dose of laudanum. Any more would risk respiratory failure. I moved to the bedside, horrified to see that the deterioration had advanced significantly in just a few hours. The definition between her torso and limbs had all but disappeared. Through her shift, I could see that her abdomen had become nearly transparent, revealing organs that seemed to be losing their structural integrity, merging into one another. We need to cool her, I said, thinking aloud. If heat accelerates this process... Ice, Mrs. Montgomery said immediately, from the ice house. Bring as much as you can, I instructed Martha, who hurried from the room. While waiting, I soaked cloths in cool water from the wash basin and laid them gently over Eliza's forehead. She whimpered at the contact, but seemed to find some relief from the coolness. Talk to me, Eliza, I said, trying to distract her from the pain. Tell me about your studies. Dr. Thatcher mentioned you're fond of books. She swallowed hard, struggling to speak through her suffering. Natural philosophy is my favorite. I've been reading Mr. Darwin's journals. An intellectual pursuit many would consider unsuitable for a young lady, I said with a small smile. A ghost of amusement flickered across her face. Father doesn't approve, says it will make me unmarriageable. And what do you think? I think truth matters more than convention. Something about her words struck me. Here was a young woman in 1849 Alabama, daring to pursue knowledge that challenged established beliefs. I wondered what else Eliza Montgomery questioned about the world around her. Martha returned with 2 servants carrying buckets of ice. Under my direction, they placed chunks of ice wrapped in thin cloths around Eliza's body, careful not to place any direct weight on her increasingly fragile form. The effect was immediate. Eliza's breathing eased, her features relaxing as the cold seemed to temporarily halt the burning sensation within her. "Better," she whispered. "Thank you." We maintained the ice treatment through the night, replacing melted pieces with fresh ones from the ice house. By dawn, Eliza had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her condition temporarily stabilized. "The ice helps," I told Mrs. Montgomery, as the first light of day filtered through the curtains. "It seems to slow the process, though I don't understand why. Can we simply keep her surrounded by ice indefinitely?" she asked, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "I'm afraid not. Even with the plantation's ice house, it's not a sustainable solution, and it merely treats the symptom, not the cause." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "I still need to see Weeping Creek." An hour later, Martha led me through the plantation's grounds. We followed a narrow path that wound through cotton fields before entering a dense stand of cypress trees. The morning air was already thick with humidity, my shirt clinging to my back as we walked. "People don't come to this part of the property much," Martha said, breaking the silence. "Not since before Miss Eliza was born." "Why is that?" She hesitated. "Some places got a feeling about them, Doctor. This creek, it ain't right." "In what way?" "Slaves won't come here to draw water, even in the driest seasons. Animals avoid it too. Even the judge won't ride this way if he can help it." We emerged from the trees into a small clearing. Before us lay Weeping Creek, a narrow waterway perhaps 15 feet across. Despite the summer heat, a mist hovered above its surface, giving it an otherworldly appearance. The water itself was unusually still, with none of the ripples or movements one would expect from a flowing creek. "This is where Miss Eliza had her picnic?" I asked, approaching the bank. Martha nodded, keeping her distance. "Right here, with 3 other young ladies from town and their chaperone, Mrs. Whitmore." I knelt by the water's edge, studying the creek carefully. The water was clear, yet had an unusual quality to it, almost too clear, as if looking through glass rather than water. No fish disturbed its surface, no insects skimmed across it. It was eerily lifeless. Has the creek always looked like this? Far as I know. Been here since before the plantation. The Choctaw people had another name for it before the white folks came. Called it the place where flesh surrenders. I looked up sharply. "What did you say?" "That's what old Joseph told me. He was brought here as a boy, learned some of the local Indian words from the few who remained. Said this place was sacred to them, but dangerous. A place of transformation." I turned back to the creek, my scientific mind warring with the implications of what I was hearing. "And you believe these legends had something to do with Eliza's condition?" Martha's expression remained impassive. "I believe there are things in this world that white doctors' books don't explain, sir. Miss Eliza reached into these waters and touched something she shouldn't have. Now she's paying the price." I removed a small glass vial from my medical bag. "I'm going to take a sample of this water for analysis." "Be careful not to touch it directly," Martha warned. Using a stick, I submerged the vial and collected the sample, noting that the water seemed slightly viscous, clinging to the glass in an unusual manner. I sealed it carefully and placed it in my bag. "Did Eliza mention exactly where she saw this light underwater?" Martha pointed to a spot about 6 feet from the bank. "There, where the water looks deepest." I stared at the indicated area but saw nothing unusual, just the same glassy stillness that characterized the entire creek. Yet as I watched, I had the distinct impression that the water in that spot was different somehow, denser perhaps, or refracting light in a subtly altered way. "I need to get closer," I said, more to myself than to Martha. "Doctor, please." I waved away her concern. "I'll be careful." Removing my boots and rolling up my trousers, I waded into the creek. The water was shockingly cold despite the summer heat, numbing my feet almost instantly. I moved cautiously toward the deeper section Martha had indicated. The creek bed was smooth, unnaturally so, as if worn down by centuries of some strange erosion. As I approached the deeper section, I noticed a faint luminescence beneath the surface, not bright enough to be called a light, but a subtle glow that seemed to emanate from the creek bed itself. I leaned closer, trying to identify the source. The glow pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Fascinating. I reached toward it, my scientific curiosity overriding Martha's warning. "Dr. Barrett, don't touch it." Her cry broke my trance. I pulled back my hand just as my fingers were about to breach the water's surface directly above the glow. What was I thinking? After what happened to Eliza, I backed away carefully, returning to the bank where Martha stood, her face tight with fear. "I apologize," I said, shaken by my own recklessness. "You were right to stop me." "Some things call to us," she said quietly. "Make us forget ourselves." I put my boots back on, my mind racing with possibilities. We should return to the house. I need to examine this water sample and speak with Eliza again. As we walked back, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about medicine and the natural world. Could there truly be phenomena that existed beyond the boundaries of scientific understanding? As a man of medicine, I had always believed that every mystery had a rational explanation. But Weeping Creek and Eliza's impossible condition challenged those beliefs. Upon our return, I found the plantation in an uproar. Judge Montgomery had arrived home unexpectedly and discovered my presence. He was waiting in the main hall, a tall, imposing figure with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. "You must be Dr. Barrett," he said, his voice clipped. "The physician my wife summoned without my knowledge or consent." I bowed slightly. "Judge Montgomery, I apologize for any impropriety, but Dr. Thatcher believed my expertise might be beneficial in your daughter's case. My daughter's case is a private family matter. I've already consulted with 3 physicians who could offer no help. I see no reason to parade Eliza's suffering before yet another useless practitioner." Mrs. Montgomery appeared from a side room, her face pale but determined. "Hiram, please. Dr. Barrett has already made progress. The ice treatment brought Eliza relief last night." "Temporary relief," he snapped. "And at what cost?" "The servants talk, Caroline. The entire county will soon know about our daughter's condition." "Is your reputation more important than Eliza's life?" she asked, her voice trembling with rage. The judge's expression hardened. "You forget yourself, madam. Our family name is Eliza's legacy, the only thing she will have left when this affliction has run its course." "You've given up on her," Mrs. Montgomery whispered, horrified. "I am a practical man. 3 doctors have confirmed there is no cure. I will not expose our family to scandal and pity for nothing." I stepped forward. "Judge Montgomery, if I may, I believe there might be a connection between your daughter's condition and Weeping Creek." His head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. "You've been to the creek? Who authorized this?" "I did," Mrs. Montgomery said defiantly. The judge's face flushed with anger. "The creek is off limits. It has always been off limits. I made that abundantly clear when we settled here. Yet you allowed Eliza to picnic there," I pointed out. "I was in Montgomery on business. Had I been home—" He stopped, composing himself. "Dr. Barrett, I appreciate your concern, but your services are no longer required. I must ask you to leave my property immediately." "Hiram, no!" Mrs. Montgomery protested. "It's all right," I said, raising a hand to calm her. "Judge Montgomery, before I go, may I at least share what I've observed and my recommendations for continuing Eliza's care?" He hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "You may speak with Dr. Thatcher. He can relay any pertinent information to the family. Thank you. And the water sample I collected will remain here," he finished firmly. "Whatever you believe you found in that creek stays on Montgomery land." I saw there was no point in arguing. "As you wish. May I say goodbye to Eliza?" "No, she is resting now. It would only distress her." With no other choice, I surrendered the vial of creek water and gathered my belongings. Dr. Thatcher met me in the guest room as I packed my medical bag. "I'm sorry, James," he said, genuine regret in his voice. The judge's set in his ways. "What's his objection to the creek, William?" He seemed almost frightened when I mentioned it. Thatcher sighed. "There are stories about that land, dating back to before the Montgomerys arrived. Native legends, slave whispers. The judge considers such talk superstitious nonsense, yet he's always forbidden anyone from going near Weeping Creek. Contradictory, I know. And what do you think? I think there are mysteries in this world that defy rational explanation." He handed me a small package wrapped in oilcloth, the water sample. I replaced the judge's vial with creek water from another location. I took it, surprised by my friend's deception. "Thank you, William. I'll analyze it as soon as I return to Mobile. If I discover anything, "I'll continue the ice treatments in your absence," he interrupted. "It's the only thing that seems to help her." As I rode away from the Montgomery plantation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was abandoning Eliza to a fate worse than death. But I had no choice. With the judge's opposition, my hands were tied, at least for now. In Mobile, I immediately set to work examining the water sample from Weeping Creek. Under the microscope, I observed something extraordinary. The water contained minuscule particles that seemed to be in constant motion, unlike any microorganism I had ever seen. They moved with purpose, occasionally joining together to form larger structures before breaking apart again. More disturbing still, when I placed a drop of the water on a slide with a sample of rabbit blood, the particles immediately swarmed the blood cells surrounding them. Over the course of an hour, I watched in astonishment as the blood cells began to lose their structural integrity, not dissolving exactly, but transforming into something that resembled the particles themselves. It was as if the water contained some agent that could rewrite the fundamental nature of living tissue. I spent 3 days conducting experiments, documenting my findings meticulously. The creek water reacted differently with different organic materials. Plant cells showed resistance, while animal tissues succumbed quickly. Most intriguing of all, when exposed to heat, the particles became more active, more aggressive in their consumption of cellular material. When chilled, they grew dormant. This explained why the ice treatments had helped Eliza. The cold was slowing whatever process was occurring within her body. On the 4th day, I received an urgent letter from Dr. Thatcher. "James, Eliza's condition deteriorates rapidly. The ice no longer provides relief. Judge Montgomery has relented and requests your immediate return. Bring whatever knowledge you have gained. There is little time left." I departed that same hour, traveling through the night to reach Willow Creek by dawn. The Montgomery plantation looked different in the pale morning light, somehow diminished, as if a shadow had fallen over it. Martha met me at the door, her eyes red from weeping. "She's still with us, doctor." "But barely." She led me to Eliza's room, where the scene that greeted me would haunt me for the rest of my days. The girl lay on the bed, but she barely resembled a human form anymore. Her body had lost almost all structure, appearing as little more than a vaguely person-shaped mass beneath her shift. Only her face remained relatively intact, though her features had begun to sag unnaturally. Mrs. Montgomery sat beside her, holding a hand that was more liquid than solid. Judge Montgomery stood by the window, his proud frame now stooped with grief and resignation. "You've returned," he said without turning. "Have you discovered anything that might save my daughter, doctor?" The defeat in his voice told me he expected no miracle. "I've learned more about her condition," I said carefully. "Though I cannot promise a cure, I believe I understand what's happening to her." Eliza's eyes fluttered open at the sound of my voice. "Dr. Barrett," she whispered, her voice bubbling strangely in her throat. "You came back." "I promised I would," I said, moving to her bedside. "Tell me," she said, "the truth. What's happening to me?" I looked to her parents. Judge Montgomery nodded almost imperceptibly. "The water in Weeping Creek contains something unusual," I began. "Microscopic particles unlike anything I've encountered in medical literature. When you touched the light beneath the surface, these particles entered your body. They're changing you, Eliza, restructuring your tissues at a fundamental level." "Into what?" she asked, her scientific curiosity undimmed even now. "I don't know," I admitted. "But the process accelerates with heat and slows with cold. That's why the ice helped initially, but it doesn't help anymore," Judge Montgomery said bitterly. "The transformation has progressed too far," I explained. "The particles have reached a critical mass within her system." Mrs. Montgomery let out a small sob. "Is there nothing to be done? Nothing at all?" I hesitated. "There is one possibility. It's experimental, dangerous, and I cannot predict the outcome." Judge Montgomery turned from the window, hope kindling in his eyes for the first time. "Speak plainly, doctor. The particles are vulnerable to extreme cold. If we could lower Eliza's body temperature significantly, more than the ice packs can achieve, we might be able to neutralize them completely." "How would we accomplish this?" he demanded. "There's a technique being explored in certain European medical circles. Total immersion in ice water, carefully monitored to prevent death from exposure while reaching temperatures low enough to freeze these particles," Eliza finished for me, understanding immediately. "Yes, in theory." "The risk?" Judge Montgomery asked. "Considerable. The shock could stop her heart, and even if successful, I cannot say what state her body will be in afterward. The damage already done may be irreversible." Eliza's liquid hand moved slightly in her mother's grasp. "I want to try," she said clearly. "I'm not afraid to die, but I cannot bear this dissolution much longer." Her parents exchanged glances, years of shared life allowing them to communicate without words. Finally, Judge Montgomery nodded. "Prepare whatever you need, doctor. We'll attempt your procedure." The next hours were a flurry of activity. Servants emptied the ice house, breaking the large blocks into manageable pieces. A copper bathtub was brought to Eliza's room and filled with cold water. Dr. Thatcher arrived to assist, bringing additional medical supplies from town. As evening approached, we were ready. Moving Eliza would be the first challenge. Her body had become so unstable that any pressure caused parts of her to simply give way. "We'll need to slide her onto a sheet," I instructed. "Then use the sheet as a sling to transfer her to the tub." With agonizing care, Martha and Mrs. Montgomery positioned a sheet beside Eliza while Dr. Thatcher and I gently rolled her onto it. Even this minimal movement caused her to cry out as portions of her body shifted unnaturally. "I'm sorry, Miss Eliza," Martha whispered, tears streaming down her face. Once Eliza was secured on the sheet, the four of us lifted her carefully and carried her to the waiting tub. The ice had already been added to the water, which now hovered just above freezing. "This will be extremely unpleasant," I warned Eliza. "The cold will feel like 1,000 knives at first. Then numbness will set in. You may lose consciousness. That's to be expected. We'll monitor your heart and breathing throughout." She nodded, her eyes clear despite her fear. "I'm ready." We lowered her into the ice bath, still wrapped in the sheet. The moment the water touched her, Eliza screamed, a sound of such primal agony that Mrs. Montgomery collapsed into Judge Montgomery's arms, unable to watch. "Hold her head above water," I instructed Thatcher, who positioned himself at the head of the tub, supporting Eliza's neck and shoulders. The transformation was immediate and astonishing. As the cold penetrated her liquefying tissues, they began to solidify, not returning to normal human flesh, but at least maintaining some structure rather than continuing to melt away. Eliza's screams subsided into whimpers, then silence as her body temperature plummeted. Her breathing became shallow, her pulse weakening beneath my fingers as I monitored her wrist. "She's too cold," Thatcher warned after 20 minutes. "Her heartbeat is dangerously slow." "A few minutes more," I insisted. "The particles must be completely dormant." Judge Montgomery paced behind us, his composure finally breaking. "If she dies this way, she's dying already," I reminded him gently. "This is her only chance." At the 30-minute mark, Eliza's skin had taken on a bluish tinge, her breathing almost imperceptible. I nodded to Thatcher. "Now, we must warm her gradually. Too quickly, and the particles may reactivate." We lifted her from the ice bath, her body now rigid with cold but still misshapen, like a wax figure partially melted then refrozen. We dried her carefully and wrapped her in blankets heated by the fire. For hours, we maintained a vigil, gradually increasing the warmth around her while monitoring for any signs of renewed liquefaction. By midnight, her body temperature had risen to a safer level, her pulse stronger, more regular, and miraculously, her tissues remained stable. The particles, it seemed, had been neutralized by the extreme cold. As dawn broke, Eliza opened her eyes. "Am I still here?" she whispered. "You are," I confirmed, taking her hand. A hand that, while deformed, no longer threatened to dissolve at my touch. "And am I still melting?" "No. The process appears to have been halted." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you, Dr. Barrett." Over the following weeks, Eliza's condition stabilized further. While her body would never return to its original form, her limbs remained partially fused, her features slightly melted like a candle left in the sun. The progressive liquefaction had been stopped completely. Judge Montgomery, true to his concern for the family's reputation, created a narrative for public consumption. Eliza had contracted a rare tropical disease during a visit to relatives in the Caribbean, leaving her partially paralyzed but in no danger of death. She would live out her days in relative seclusion on the plantation, cared for by her devoted family. The truth of what happened at Weeping Creek remained known only to those few of us who had witnessed it firsthand. The creek itself was dammed and diverted by the judge's order, the area fenced off and forbidden to all. As for the nature of the particles in the water, I continued my research in secret for many years. I never again found anything like them, despite examining water samples from across the continent. Whatever had affected Eliza Montgomery appeared to be unique to that small, unassuming creek in Alabama. Sometimes I wonder if Martha was right. If there are things in this world that defy scientific explanation, phenomena that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we fear, the girl who melted from the inside taught me humility as a physician and as a man of science. Eliza lived for another 43 years, mostly confined to the east wing of the Montgomery plantation. Judge Montgomery never allowed her to be studied by other physicians, though rumors of her condition occasionally surfaced in medical circles. She became a voracious reader and correspondent, conducting extensive studies in natural philosophy and even publishing several papers under a male pseudonym. I visited her once a year until her death in 1892. During my final visit, she confided something that still haunts me. "The light beneath the water, Dr. Barrett," she whispered, her voice weak with age. "It wasn't just light. It was aware. It knew me, wanted me." She gripped my hand with her misshapen fingers. And sometimes, in my dreams, I feel it still, waiting beneath the surface of the world, reaching for us all. Eliza Montgomery was buried in the family plot under cover of darkness. Her gravestone bears only her name and dates, with no mention of her extraordinary affliction. The Montgomery plantation fell into disrepair after her death, eventually abandoned entirely. The land was reclaimed by nature, Weeping Creek breaking free of its constraints to flow once more. I am an old man now, my practice long since passed to younger hands, but I still keep my notes on Eliza's case, along with a small vial of water from Weeping Creek, water that, even after all these decades, still contains those mysterious moving particles. Sometimes at night I hold it up to the lamplight and watch them dance behind the glass, remembering the girl who melted from the inside, and wondering what other mysteries lie waiting in the dark corners of our world. As for the 3 doctors who refused to touch her, Collins, Foster, and eventually Thatcher, I cannot judge them harshly. Some phenomena push against the very boundaries of what the human mind can comprehend. We like to believe that science can explain everything, that there are no mysteries beyond our understanding. Eliza Montgomery taught me otherwise, and sometimes, on sleepless nights, I find myself wondering, did I truly save her? Or did I merely interrupt a transformation that we, in our limited understanding, could not comprehend? Perhaps Eliza wasn't melting at all, but becoming something else entirely, something beyond our narrow definition of human. These are questions for which I have no answers, only the humbling knowledge that our world contains wonders and horrors, yet unnamed by science. And perhaps it is better that way, for there are some things mankind was never meant to understand.